All right, everybody, welcome back to episode 2 of Trident Talk. And today's episode, we're going above the roofline. And with me, I have my handsome business partner, the Duke of Decking himself, Caleb Parks.
Thanks, Arish, man.
I'm excited for this.
I'm super excited. Still a little nervous, but should be fun.
Episode 2.
Episode 2,
We're getting
right?
better with each one.
The first one, a lot of growing pains, I think. You can definitely hear it in the podcast. But
Just
should only get better from here, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sitting here and being able to talk about all your experiences, man. And one thing I wanted to have you come on and just talk about, first, I want you to introduce yourself. I want the people to know who Caleb Parks is, how you got into roofing. I want to know all about you. So tell me about yourself.
Oh, man, it's a loaded question. So, name's Caleb Parks, right? I've been in roofing for just under 4 years. It'll be 4 years in January. And how I ended up here is actually kind of funny because ultimately I moved to San Antonio from a small town south of San Antonio, Pleasanton. Because of school. So
When did you move here?
In 2018. I moved to San Antonio about 3 days after I graduated from high school. And I moved up here, I got an apartment, and then I decided I was going to go to UTSA, so I did a fall semester there. I was going to go get my civil engineering degree at one point. And I was sitting in classes, and I was sitting here, and I was like, this is a lot of money for things that I am absolutely not interested in. I cannot picture a future where I would have to sit at a desk every day, do the same things day in, day out. It just sounded like my own personal hell. So I decided I was going to stop going to school right there, take a little bit of time to figure out what I was interested in. From there, I was working as a parts pooler while going to college at the same time at Jordan Ford.
Parts pooler. What does that do?
So basically, I worked in a warehouse where you get these little slips for vehicle parts.
Okay.
And I would look at the numbers, and I'd go pull the parts off the shelf, bring it to the front so that it could be sold. I did that for like 8 months. When I first moved to San Antonio, it was really good. It was a kind of a transitional job, also 18, not much experience. From there, after deciding to not go to school, I tried my hand at sales. I actually sold makeup. Kind of interesting considering that I don't wear makeup. Yeah.
You went from roofing to makeup.
No,
that's a big jump.
So that's what I started in. So I went from pulling parts to selling makeup, and I did that for about 2 months, but obviously it's not a high ticket item. I'm a dude. I don't wear the product.
What kind of makeup?
It was called Makeover is Essential. So if you've ever been approached by a dude in the parking lot who's like, hey, did you get a bag of makeup? And they try to hand it to you and sell you in the parking lot or something like that. That's what I did.
I was one of them.
Yeah, direct marketing. So that was my first real experience in sales, was doing that. Did it for about 2 months, traveled to different places in the nation, just selling makeup in parking lots basically. So after a little while, the money obviously was not that great. You're selling makeup. So I decided to move into car sales. I'm the absolute worst car salesman in the world. I went and worked at Nissan in Bernie for about 2 months. I did not even I could not sell vehicles. It was just a struggle. At this time in my career, I had no clue what I was doing. I thought sales was just talking to people, which you find is a common mistake people make, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I go to car sales for 2 months, don't even make enough to just barely get paid my draw, which is minimum wage, right? So obviously that didn't work out. It put me in debt. I got in debt, so I'm sitting here. Okay, now what do? I'm obviously not great at this sales thing, so I had a buddy who worked in construction at the time, and he got me a job as a operator for Jordan Foster for a little while.
Nice.
And I was doing that for about 6-7 months, and it was pretty all right. I knew it was something I didn't want to do long term, but it wasn't bad. The money was okay. It got me out of debt. Those things were important. But I remember in August, it's 120 degrees, and hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself. In August, I finished our project that we were on, so they moved me from the utility crew I was on to go work with the concrete crew.
Okay.
And when I went to the concrete crew,
So what kind of projects were these, by the way?
So I was putting in San Antonio's water systems and things like that. That's what I did. Is I basically dug trenches and we laid the water lines for San Antonio, or we would clear out drainage boxes or put drainage boxes in, things like that.
Gotcha.
So they moved me from the utility section to the concrete section. Well, when I went to the concrete crew, I don't speak Spanish. So there's a huge language barrier because nobody on the concrete crew spoke English. I mean, a couple of them could string some sentences together, basically tell me to grab a shovel or to do this, that, or the other. But I basically went and just stood around and talked to myself all day because there was nobody to talk to me. And because I couldn't speak to the crew and that language barrier was there, it posed a safety risk.
Yeah.
So they took me off of the machines and had me doing labor work. I wasn't too upset in the beginning. I'm still getting paid my regular operator pay, and now I'm pulling
And you don't have to worry about talking in Spanish anymore either.
Correct. But when I'm sitting there and I'm It's August. I remember this verbatim because this is when I made the decision to change things.
Yeah.
It's like 115 degrees. We're pouring a concrete slab. I'm pulling concrete. And I just remember verbatim thinking, I was like, I will do whatever it takes to not have to work like this anymore. And so from that point forward, I just started reading a bunch of books. That was in August, so I took some time, read like 4 or 5 books. And
you really started your self-development journey.
Correct.
Yeah.
I started my self-development journey, and not to sound like some kind of speed reader, I don't read very fast, but I cleared like 6 books in 2 months because I'm a big believer in Audible. Because, you know, I sat either in a machine some days, and I would just sit there with a book in my ear and listen to things, repeat, try to get these skills. That's when I truly learned that sales was more than just talking to people.
Yeah.
There was a structure in which you can kind of shape your conversation to affect the outcome. So that's something that I learned there. And when it comes to getting into roofing, I knew I didn't want to be construction anymore. So I started looking at a bunch of different sales jobs. I also knew that I didn't want to sell makeshift and I didn't want to do cars.
Yeah, you already had those two experiences out the way. Those two were already out the way.
So I looked at windows, I looked at solar, I looked at roofing, I looked at timeshares, I looked at a bunch of different stuff, took a bunch of different interviews, and why I eventually decided to settle on roofing was because I had an opportunity with a company that offered pretty good training pay at that time. They had a good training program, it looked like. So I went ahead and kind of jumped into roofing because it was high volume, high commission, and I felt that was also important. And the number one reason I think I went into roofing was probably the freedom and flexibility of my scheduling. Because ultimately, if you work in roofing, you work for a good company, you kind of get to set your hours because you're all commission.
Yep.
So,
it's not like that in car sales or anywhere else, honestly.
No.
A lot of sales places are very micromanaged in terms of that, but you pick a place that has the right vehicle and the right opportunity, you're able to get the work you want to do at the rate that you want to while being on the schedule that you want to.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when I started in cars, for example, I was like, so like, what are my hours? How do I work? Still, 19, not knowing how sales works. They're like,
car sales fucking sucks.
You see that sticker? And they pointed at the front, and it was like the hours are like, whatever that says, that's when you work.
Hour before, and then you stay an hour later afterwards.
Exactly.
And you're here on Saturdays, every single Saturday. So.
Yeah, so I wasn't interested in doing cars because it was just a ridiculous work-life balance. And I don't feel like the money's very great in cars. I think cars is low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can go into it. I think it's a great place to like learn the tricks of the trade when it comes to sales if you do get into a good dealership that will teach you some things. But ultimately, I think that's just a starting ground. If you're a good sales rep, you should consider looking at other industries, unless you're able to make it, I think, into the finance section of cars. That's my personal opinion. Yeah. Obviously, I didn't stay in the industry.
And that's where all the scumbags are in the finance section. So my thing about car sales is that if you're someone that's brand new into sales, I don't recommend going into car sales at first, only for the fact that you don't want to build any bad habits from the get-go, right? And a lot of the things that they're teaching you, a lot of the trainings that you're getting at car dealerships are very, very outdated. They're all very much back to like oh yeah, you're going to fucking talk to them until they sign, like they're not leaving your site. You're going to stick with them. You're going to get coffee with them. You're going to do all these things with them, right? So I think it's an interesting way. We see a lot of people coming from car sales into solar and into roofing and stuff, and that's because they're getting that freedom and they're kind of having to re-educate themselves and new learnings and stuff. But for first sales job, to get work ethic, I think car sales is a good place to go.
That's true. It will definitely teach you work ethic.
Right?
And I don't want to ever lump any industry into just like bad actors, because I think there's bad actors in every industry. I think there's good actors in every industry. The one thing I can say about cars that if you're looking at sales is it's very low barrier to entry. It's very easy to get a job in that industry. So it's a good way to get your feet wet, and a lot of people aren't comfortable with going straight commission when they've never done sales before. A lot of car dealerships offer some kind of draw or base pay, and that gives a lot of people safety and comfort to start that process of moving into commission. But that's how I ended up in roofing.
So yeah, going from makeup into San Antonio water system, operating constructions, into going and not speaking Spanish, doing concrete, and then into roofing. So definitely a lot of steps on the way.
Yeah, I learned a lot of things from each one. I mean, like when it comes to makeup, for example, doing that direct marketing, I learned to be more comfortable with just approaching strangers in random circumstances. Teaches you confidence, teaches you how to start a conversation with somebody, teaches you little tricks on how to get people to pay attention for a short amount of time, which really translated to my door knocking career later. When it comes to construction, I mean, honestly, I just learned how to work hard. I learned how to deal with the heat, learned how to work hard. That translated really well when I went into roofing.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you left construction and get out of 120-degree weather and you went into roofing, that might
I didn't exactly hit the goal.
That's not the best.
But the money made sense. It made more sense than the money I was making there.
That's your experiences you're getting to.
Correct. And so that's ultimately why I ended up in roofing.
Awesome, man. Talk to me about the roofing industry in general. So you had makeup done, you had cars done, construction done, you had a kind of a little bit of experiences under your belt. what made you want to pick the roofing company over, I mean, I know you looked at solar, I know you looked at everything else, but is there anything specific about the roofing company that just really was like, okay, I can come in here and from the get-go make a killing? I know they had the training pay, I know they had a good training system and everything that you joined and stuff, plus the freedom, but was there anything specific about the roofing industry where you're like, okay, I'm gonna come in here and make a splash?
Specifically with the roofing industry, really it came down to, like, after I took all those interviews, that looked like the best opportunity because it's high commission, high volume. I like the freedom. Basically, all of my success was going to be put on my back to do it, and that's what I was looking for at that time. Now, that being said, I was 20 when I made that decision to go into roofing, so
You learned a little bit.
I've learned a lot since then.
Yeah.
So, if I was to look and start over from scratch and go start to sell for another roofing company, some of the things I would consider is pay is important, but it's not the most important thing in my opinion when it comes to selecting a company, especially in roofing to work for. I think the most important thing you should look for is a culture, a family, a work family that you're comfortable spending a lot of time with. Because ultimately in roofing, we make our living when other people are home, so we work untraditional hours, and that's not for everybody, right? So you want to work in a company that you at least enjoy the people you're around. We're struggling together. We're having the same, home work-life balance problems where it's like, I got to be out between 5 and 8, but also my kids are home, or I want to have dinner with my family. Like these are troubles. I mean, I don't have kids, but I want to be home with my fiance. I'd love to sit on the couch and hang out and watch TV, but that's a trade-off of the industry I work in, is I have to be out and about selling when people are home. And that means the times that I necessarily want to be home are the prime times for me to make money for myself. So that's one thing I would take away. One of the other reasons I did end up going with the company that I was with is just ultimately at the time the leader seemed like a great situation, good guy to learn from, and he was a good mentor. I learned a lot from him over the few years, but that's why I initially chose to go that direction.
But talk to me about your old roofing company. I know how long were you with your old roofing company? I'll start with there actually.
Oh, I've worked for 2 different roofing companies.
Talk to me about the first one.
Partnering into Trident. The first one, I worked there for 3 years, or 2 weeks short of 3 years, and it was a really good experience for a really long time. I think I learned quite a bit on just being 20 and having really no skills when it comes to sales or leadership or anything. I got a lot of opportunities. I was able to get a lot of experience. I learned a lot. Overall, it was a good experience being there. I decided to leave eventually just because of some differences that I had, and I went and worked for another company, also great company here in San Antonio. I was their sales manager for about 6 months. Ultimately, I found that I wasn't a good cultural fit for them, and so we decided to part ways amicably. It was great.
Timing was amazing.
Timing
worked out really well for us.
Timing worked out really well for us, and so I decided to part ways with that company after 6 months, and we partnered in to do Trident, and the rest has been history since then.
I'm making a history right now, but talk to me about the first company that you worked at. You were there for almost 3 years, just about 3 years. And one of the things about sales in general, but sales and roofing, solar, a lot of these companies have a lot of high turnover. So being there for 3 years, I'd say that's pretty impressive. What made you want to stay those 3 years that you were there?
One of the biggest reasons I stayed there was I don't believe in taking jobs for money. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad somewhere around when I was 20. And one of those
6 books in the 2 months.
Yeah, correct, right. So one of the big takeaways of that book, in my opinion, like one of the biggest things that I've learned that has shaped my career kind of moving forward was you do not take a job for money. You take a job for experience. Yeah. So I stayed there for 3 years because I was getting tons of experience in things that I didn't think I'd have opportunity in otherwise.
Okay.
And that's what kept me there. I was getting the career growth that I wanted, exposure into the things that I wanted, and developing skills that I wanted there. So overall, that's why I stayed there for 3 years. It was just a matter of developing my own tool belt, if you will, of management skills, sales skills, things like that.
Would you say you left that company on bad terms, or do you think you left in your opinion, I know everybody has a different opinion, right? But in your opinion, when you left your first company, would you say it's on bad terms? Would you say it was on, understanding, respectable terms, kind of, both are in the same boat, typically?
I tried my best to leave on good terms. I had felt dissatisfied with some things that were going on towards my last year at the end. So I started to consider other options. When I got an option and an offer from another company that was really nice, I gave them the opportunity to match it or do better. The other company did even better than at that point, and it was just made financial sense for me and my family to move at that point. Also, I was just not super happy with what was going on, so
The company.
it wasn't fair for me to be there because if I'm unhappy with something that's going there, it's going to become a cultural problem for the company, and that's not fair. I
And
cared
you're not
about
even
the
going to
people
give
that worked
100%
there.
of your. I mean, it's hard to give something 100, 110% when you're not on the same page as everybody else and on the same wavelength as everybody else,
And
right? So
ultimately, to me, it just I truthfully I care about a lot of the people that work there, and
Right.
if I'm not 100% bought into what's going on, it's not fair to the owner, it's not fair to the
Absolutely.
management staff. So that's why I considered looking at other options, and I gave it 2 weeks. A traditional 2 weeks, and this is where things get a little funky because I gave my 2 weeks notice, and I'm sitting on a job site that I'm building, right? And one of the parts of doing a job is you take pictures throughout it so you can prove what was put on. You have pictures for your insurance company and things
Right.
like that, and to give to the homeowner when you're done. Well, I went to log into my CRM after I had given my 2 weeks notice, and I can't log in.
Really?
Yeah, I can't log in. Nobody's called
quick.
me. Yeah, nobody's called me. It's only been like I literally made a phone call, sent the email, and
That's
30
awful
minutes.
for project management. How are you? Okay, continue. I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah.
30 minutes later, I can't log into any of the resources.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here, I'm like, what's going on? So I called the office. I'm like, hey, I can't log in. Like I'm trying to take photos of XYZ. This is what's going on. Oh, yeah, we went ahead and just immediately terminated you and removed
While
access.
you're on a fucking job site, that's so counterproductive in my opinion.
So I would agree. So
like you're literally on a job site, you're trying to upload your picture so that they can get the insurance money. Everybody like this is part of the operating like procedures and stuff, and they're just like, all right.
I was also 3 hours
Disconnected.
I was also 3 hours away from our home office in a different city and location when I did this.
What
So
city was this?
I was in Killeen.
Okay.
So I was in Killeen. I live in San Antonio. That's where the HQ is out of and things like that. So I'm 3 hours away, out of town working, and nobody calls me to tell me they're just going to immediately terminate me. I find out because I can't log into anything,
Yeah.
and I call the office. I'm like, hey, what's going on? So the office office director goes ahead and says, hey, like we had to terminate you. We just want to make sure everything's good, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, I'm 3
Where do I
hours.
send these pictures? How do I get home?
Yeah, I'm like, hey, okay, well, I mean, can you tell? And then I said, hey, can you tell XYZ, the production manager, to come out here, take these photos, this is what's going on, like, this is where we're at, this is what the homeowner needs. And I said, okay, well, if that's the case, then I'm just going to have to go. Like, I understand where you're coming from, but this is where I'm coming from, too.
Yeah.
So, from that point, I left, went back to our storm dorm, quote unquote, and packed up my stuff and proceeded to have a 3-hour drive home at the end of the day.
That's wild to
So
me.
I really did try to leave on good terms. I understand where they're coming from. Like, as a business, if you have a manager that decides to go, I understand why you don't want to let the 2 weeks fulfill. That's fine. I get it. I would have preferred somebody would have gave me a call, seeing how I'd been there for 3 years. But overall, like, I tried to leave on really good terms.
Well, I'm glad you shared that with me because not only for me, but for everyone watching, that shows a lot of context. Number one, about the kind of company that you were working at. And like number two, it shows for someone like us in our position right now where we're trying to be leaders and kind of learn from everybody else. One of the best things about being in those situations is you're learning all the good things that you're doing from these leaders, and you're also learning what not to do from these leaders as well too, right? And going into that, for those that don't know, me and Caleb have been friends since February, March, but been in business together since I want to say like June, late June, early July. And that's when Caleb came and joined Trident full time. And throughout these last 2 months, I've had multiple times where Caleb's woken me up to some kind of interesting text or some kind of update and whatever, and I'm just like, yep, that's perfect, let's keep it going. On Friday was one where I definitely will remember this one for a while. I wake up and the first thing I see is a text message from Caleb saying, or it wasn't even a text message saying anything, it was a picture of a cease and desist letter.
Yeah, when you're 20 and you need a job and you're in debt and you have no money,
You'll sign whatever the fuck they give you.
you're like,
honestly,
whatever.
At this point, right? But
ultimately, though, it's another road. It's another hurdle on the road to success. Like, if it was easy, everybody would do it. We know that problems are going to come. It may be financial issues. It may be family issues. It may be competition issues, whatever it is. I know that there's going to be issues on this journey to growing this company. So this is just one hurdle to overcome.
you remember the first thing I texted you back when you sent over the picture of the cease and desist?
What was that?
I said make a copy of it so we can wipe our ass with it because I really was so upset. And the second thing I said was this should be a prime example of the kind of leaders that we're going to be. If you're someone, no matter what industry you're in, it really doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you're someone that's threatening lawsuits and as someone that's a lawsuit leader or someone that's pretty much using legality to kind of keep your team together and hold your team at one, that's a really, really bad character in my opinion. And I was very happy that you got, I mean, not happy, obviously. I'm not happy that you got this fucking letter, right? But I'm happy that number one, it's early on in the industry, or it's early on in our company and our partnership together. So that way, this is a hurdle that you figure out early on rather than, and we have lawyers and stuff, which is fine, but it's good to see, number one, your potential is threatening other people, because only time people really resort to these kind of things is when they're feeling threatened. You have a 23-year-old kid that worked for you for 3 years that helped you build out your operations, and now he's just trying to go and do his own thing, respectfully. You're going to go after him with a cease and desist after that?
And like, I get it. I mean, as a business, if you have that power, maybe you want to use it. Maybe
no, you don't. Because we had that power
personally,
too.
I wouldn't do it. I've thought about this from a lot of perspectives, and I don't see a circumstance in which I personally would do that. To me, I would be more ecstatic if a mentee of mine was feeling confident enough to try to go down this journey, especially knowing how hard it is, that I was able to help somebody feel confident, somebody to give somebody skills in their life to be able to chase their dream. I'd be ecstatic.
I feel like there's no bigger flex than that, right?
In my opinion, there isn't, and I also believe that I'm hesitant. I don't want to say anything bad.
I don't know how much we can talk about it on it. No, to be honest with you, I was even worried. I like whispered on the side, like, hey, can I talk about the cease and desist? But I don't know how much we can talk about it, legality for like content or podcasts and stuff. I just wanted you to know that I think it's silly that people resort to these kind of things, number one. Number two, I'm happy because we're seeing how we're not going to be.
Yeah.
That's the essential of it, right? Is that like, number one, if anyone were to see this in the future and kind of see where we started, it's tough getting these kind of legality letters early on when you're trying to figure out overhead and business and leads and all these things, right? But I think it's cool. I think, second thing I told you after wiping my ass with it was we should probably frame it and hang it in the office just because I think it's funny, right? But
yeah, you've definitely been more to the wind than me with that. I have been a little, talking to attorneys nonstop basically since I've gotten it, figuring out what our course of action is going to be. We have a couple different things that we can do.
Yeah.
Obviously, can't talk too much about it like right now.
And
we'll leave it again, I have nothing against the company that's doing it. It's that they were a key part of my career development. They helped me. I learned a lot about business because that was my first real career experience as a young man. And I wouldn't trade anything in the world for it. But ultimately, this obviously isn't my favorite thing in the world to deal with, but again, like I've said a million times, it's just another hurdle to overcome.
It is what it is.
If that means that I can't do, work until X date, then I can't do work till X date, and I'll
in
go
San Antonio.
Storm chase somewhere.
In San Antonio,
or I'll open an office in the next city over. It's not.
We have a plan.
Yeah, exactly. There's a plan. So, and it just depends on what the attorneys advise us what's best.
Yeah. So going into that, I wanted to ask you something about one of your craziest roofing experiences. And typically when I was thinking of that question, I was thinking it was going to be on a job or on a site or maybe with a homeowner or something like that. But now just kind of learning about how the roofing industry is, I'm thinking your craziest roofing experience might be just with another company or another owner. So tell me about some of your craziest experiences.
I have a couple. So I'm going to start with some of the roofer experiences I've had. So first, I was a part of a company that, in my position as a sales manager at that point in time, or the branch manager, whatever title, I would go to different locations. I would help establish the office, and we would basically use a storm as a catalyst, as a reason to open a new location.
And that's super smart too, because you know that overhead and all the capital that you need is kind of going to be coming with the events and
instead of starting from scratch. You're definitely you have a reason to be there, and you have a reason to establish an office, and now you have capital and money to kind of keep that office established based on the storm, right? So that's huge. But in storm chasing, you're going to run into a lot of guys who aren't necessarily setting an office. They're just there to get some business.
Just get some bread. Yeah.
And those are some of the wildest people, in my opinion, in the roofing industry. So one time I was literally inspecting a roof and knocking doors, and there's a guy from a rival competitor across the street screaming at me from the top of the roof about how he set appointments on every house and that I shouldn't be in here.
He's on top of a homeowner's house, screaming down at you while you're on the street, while you're knocking.
Yeah, while I'm knocking doors.
And he's like, "Hey, this is my area." Is he really?
100%. So it gets even
better.
What company
was? Don't mention it.
I can't do that.
We'll talk about this afterwards.
Yeah, but it was so funny because and then I knocked the door next door to the house that he's inspecting, because to me, if there's not a new roof on there,
I don't see a sign.
I am the best roofing consultant in the industry, and that sounds arrogant, but that's truthfully my belief. I have to believe that.
Absolutely.
And if a homeowner isn't working with me, I feel like they're getting a disservice. And that's not a bash on any other roofer in the industry.
Nope.
I feel that if you work in any kind of sales role, you have to believe that you are the best solution for any homeowner or customer. for whatever you're selling, right? So that's my delusion. As I walk around, I am the best.
Delusion.
If anybody is not working with me,
It's
they're
my
not getting the
perspective,
best, right? So I'm knocking every door as long. I even knocked the door he was inspecting, but he was
That's
real mad
rude.
because the neighbor opened the door, and as the neighbor opens the door, I have him come out, and I'm pointing at the stuff that we're seeing on the neighbor's roofs and his roof. And as I'm doing this, the guy next door is like screaming down, trying to set an appointment while I'm talking to the guy. So
hey, don't listen to him. Give me a call. And
yeah,
he's
I'm
like,
already
"Shit."
up here, like, things like that. And then we walk away, I'm like, yeah, some of these roofers are crazy, man. Like,
What would be rude is if you're talking to the homeowner next door and he's on the roof saying, I'm looking at it right now. You're all good to go. He's just talking.
That's not even the wildest roofer story. The craziest one is one
tell
time
me.
I storm chased out in Lubbock, right?
Up
And
north.
yeah, in Lubbock, they get lots of hail. There's lots of roofers out there. But one time I'm knocking doors, and like I said, if you're not working with me, I believe you're not getting the best experience, right? So if you have a sign in the yard, this is gonna rub some people the wrong way. If there's not a new roof on there, I consider that still a deal to be had. And I know they have a need, and I know that they know they need a problem fixed. So those are the easiest appointments for me to set, hypothetically, is to give you that second opinion on another roofer. Some people aren't going to love to hear that, but that's I believe in like a domination type of approach to a market. I want to serve everyone. So I went in, I gave a second opinion, I signed the deal up, and I pulled a sign out of a guy's yard and put my sign in the yard instead. I put their sign, my trophy, in the trunk, and then I'm sitting here, I leave, I come back the next day, and their sign's back in the yard. I'm confused. So I walk up to the homeowner. He's like, oh, I didn't even notice that happened. So I go back, I pull that sign, put my sign back in the yard.
Again, for a second
Yeah,
time.
because I have a signed contract at this point. That guy never did. So I pull the sign, and as soon as I'm walking back, this car pulls up right behind me, starts hooping and hollering about his customer, and I'm just like, hey, man.
The
like,
same guy that
yeah, the guy that I guess I had taken the deal from at that point in time.
I'd taken the deal from.
So he's hooping and hollering. I'm like, hey, man, like, I understand it was nothing personal. Like, it was just a second opinion. He decided to go with our company over your company. I mean, like,
It is what it
it's
is.
just business, man.
It
Like,
is
I'm
what
not,
it is,
I'm
yeah.
not trying to be an ass, like, anything like that. Well, he lost it. And I was like, look, man, I'm not going to have this argument in front of the homeowner's house. Like, if you'd like to talk to me, I'm in the neighborhood. You can find me somewhere. I mean, I'll give you my number. You can call me. Like, we can talk about it. But ultimately, this is just what happened. It's nothing personal. Well, he gets mad. I hop in my car. Like, I'm putting in stuff in my CRM before I drive off because I forget that stuff constantly if I don't do it immediately. And while I'm doing that, an F-250 pulls up. And at the time, I was driving a two-door Challenger to roof out of because this is like my first year. So he pulls up and he like blocks off my car. His other car is blocked off like this. So now little 20-year-old me is just sitting in my Challenger, and this big buff, like maybe late 35, like late 30s, early 40s, like big old buff dude jumps out of the F-250. He starts screaming at me through the window. So I crack the window, being the arrogant little young guy that I am. And he's like, you gonna get out here? Let's go. And he's like trying to fight me, and I'm just like, yeah, man, I'm not gonna do that. Like, he's like, I'm gonna rip your door handle off or your door open. I said, all right, well, you could try. I mean, I'm filming this right now. Like, you're just going to pay for it later. Like, go for it. And he just screams at me for like 10 minutes of my car. Finally, the rest of the company that I work with, like, I shot a text out. I'm like, hey, I need help, please.
Now.
So, like, 4 of the guys that I work with pull up, and they see all of our wrap vehicles kind of show up, and they hop in their vehicles and leave. But that was one of the wildest experiences ever.
Roof gangs, that's crazy to me.
It's one thing I love and hate about this industry is that it is super competitive. It's almost like if you ever played sports in school, like that rivalry, like that shit talking, that fun, enthusiastic, I want to compete and dominate. Like, you are a rival team. Like, it is crazy. It's definitely. I haven't seen another industry like it when it comes to competitors and like shit talking and everything that goes on. And it's a love-hate relationship. Sometimes you're like, man, this isn't the best look for our industry. But also on the other hand, it's like, this makes me want to compete. Like, it wants me to dominate a neighborhood because you have that fire competing and have people talking shit. So that was an interesting story with different roofers. When it comes to like production stuff, some of the wildest things I've seen are like, one time we were working on an apartment complex, doing a re-roof, and it was 3 buildings. We did 2 buildings perfectly fine. We get to the 3rd building, there's a lot of rotted decking. It's like a class C property, maybe a little worse, but it wasn't in great position, like shape. We're doing the 3rd roof, and one of our roofers just falls straight through the decking and the ceiling into a unit. Yeah,
into somebody's apartment.
Yeah, and then nobody was home. They had their ceiling fan on, and it was like he fell like right next to the ceiling fan, so it was like sucking insulation into the house everywhere. He fell down and broke like her grandma's like heirloom to her. Like, it was problem after problem. It was the worst thing that could possibly happen.
God, this man fell through the decking, through like the little space in between, and into the homeowner or into the apartment lady.
Straight through the decking, through the ceiling. It was like one of the wildest things I've
crazy.
ever seen.
That's crazy.
Because usually,
Who
like
built that? That's
I have
crazy.
seen people fall through decking and ceiling, but it's typically like a leg, and like your hips get stuck, or like it's a portion of your body. I've never seen somebody clear just go straight through both.
Was he okay?
Yeah, he was all right. He was good. We took care of him, took him to the doctor, made sure he was all good there. And then we cleaned up. We, of course, took care of the person who owned the unit. Obviously, you can't replace a family heirloom, so that was tough. We just wrote a nice check. I want to say it was like a pan, like some kind of cooking pan or pot or something.
Just bring your cast iron with a little ribbon on top.
I'll be 100% honest with you. When I looked at it, it just looked like a piece of... This is horrible. It looked like trash, but it was a family heirloom, so we wrote a big check, took care of it.
Oh gosh.
They weren't gonna settle for just a new cast iron pan.
Yo, that's actually really smart. If any kind of contractor messes up anything in my house, like if it was like my PS5, I'm just gonna be like, yo, my grandfather gave me that PS5. It's a fucking heirloom, So
yeah, so
that's crazy to me.
So that was wild. Some other things. I mean, just some of the things like you see when you do roof inspections are kind of wild. Like I've seen bikes on top of roofs, and you're just like,
well.
What?
Hold on.
Yeah, exactly.
Hold on. How many stories is this house?
It's like 2 stories. Like you go up there and you're just like, how'd this scooter get up here? How'd this
outside
bike
of
get up
the
here?
house?
Yeah, it's just sitting there on the roof.
On the roof.
Yeah. I mean, obviously these aren't the nicest homes in the world when you get on these calls.
Yeah,
but
like,
how do you know? How do you leave a bike up there? It's wild, huh?
I'm thinking now. So some people were just really angry with the bike and they just
Yeeted it up.
yeeted it up there, bro.
So like you see really interesting things on top of roofs. Some of the things that make me laugh the most, I think, are probably DIY repairs or bad contractor repairs. I
want to talk about that.
Those are pretty funny because like you see stuff and you're just like, what was going through your mind when you attempted to do this? Or like, who said this was a good idea? Like the things you see. So those are pretty wild.
Going back to DIY, and I think that's because in solar you see a lot of DIYs, and those are literally the funniest systems, funniest roofs. Like it's literally So going back into DIY, right? Would you ever recommend, or have you ever seen a proper DIY roofing project that somebody maybe had called you to get like another set of eyes on? Or
That's
like,
a great question.
Yeah.
So like, take this with a grain of salt, but also I don't think roofing itself is too difficult. I think what's
like shingling. What do you mean by roofing? Because there's a lot of different components that go in
let me
there.
do this. So like if you have missing shingles, for example, it's not hard to replace those yourself.
Right.
The problem is the hazard. I don't recommend anybody who's not comfortable with like walking roofs and does it regularly to take the risk of moving your momentum to pull and hammer things on a steep slope where you could risk falling and hurting yourself.
So that's the right precautions. And
that's one of the
everything.
bigger things about hiring a professional. Another thing is like tricky, like if you have a dead valley in your roof, fixing those, if you don't know how to stop the water or what's going to work, I don't recommend you DIY that kind of stuff. It's usually not going to work for one.
Yeah.
And 2, it's probably going to cost more money in the long run because you'll try to do it and it's going to cause more problems. Now there's more to fix when somebody does come back out.
Right.
So some DIY repairs can be done, I think, by a homeowner and it be of quality. It just matters where they learned it because like you can learn a lot on YouTube. I will not. It's just like, for example, when I was growing up in high school, I had a terrible vehicle. I paid, my mom paid like $1,000 for the vehicle.
That was a Challenger, right?
No, that was the truck. It was a '96 F-150 that had been through a fence. So like it was in terrible shape.
You had to had been through a fence.
Yeah, like I was underneath this vehicle, more weekends than I wasn't for sure. And I learned how to repair everything on there because I was in high school, didn't have no money, had to pay for my repairs. Yeah. So I learned how to do everything and fix everything through YouTube. So I believe YouTube, you can learn good things, right?
Absolutely.
Same thing with
roofing. Yeah.
But there are some things that you have to be aware of, like the hazards. And are you fixing a missing shingle or are you fixing a dead valley? Are you fixing a flashing transition? These kinds of things matter. Like if you're doing step flashing or any kind of flashing work, I wouldn't recommend as a homeowner you take the risk to do that because they're the most susceptible areas for leak and they're the most complex leaks to fix.
Or any kind of decking or anything like that.
Yeah, decking honestly isn't that difficult either if it's in the middle of the roof because you just tear off the felt, you tear off the shingles, you get a big section. You can just you take a hammer, you pull the decking out, you put a new piece of decking there, you put the underlayment and the shingles. It's actually not that difficult. But
you're making it sound very easy right now. I'm over here like, what the hell?
So
it is
fairly simple. It's very simple steps. But again, the thing that you have to think about when you're doing all this is the steepness of the roof, where you're at on the roof. you're thinking about moving your body around, and that force and the inertia that you could have could just make you fall right down, things like that. So I'm not saying you should, but I'm saying it can be done, and it can be done with quality.
Okay.
Most people, I don't think, do the research sometimes that is necessary to do a good repair, and that's where the bad DIYs come into play. Like sometimes they'll have a leak, and I'll get on the roof, and there's like a 5x6 section of just tar all over the shingles. And that's not aesthetically pleasing for
Not
one.
at all, yeah.
And two, that's not the right way to do it because tar is going to dry out and crack eventually anyway. So then you're going to open up to having leaks again.
Especially here in San Antonio.
Yeah, especially here in the heat we've got.
That's crazy. I'm glad you touched on DIY a little bit about that. One thing I wanted to ask you is there's a lot of different kind of roofers you meet in this industry. You have insurance roofers, someone that's working with the insurance company to really help the homeowner out, and then you have retail roofers. Can you explain the differences between the two of them, and which one would you rather be if you had to pick between two of them?
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm the expert on all things business practices with roofing, but I will say that if I had a preference, I would prefer to be more in the retail lane just because you have more control of your profitability, more control of your branding, and you don't have to move as much. Where if your whole business as a roofer is built on insurance, in my opinion, some years you're gonna have great years if you're staying in a market like San Antonio, for example. We're gonna get hit with a great storm once every 5 years at least. You're gonna have like a fantastic storm to work. But the other 4 years you may have tiny storms, and that's gonna impact your revenue a lot if you're banking entirely on insurance.
There's a lot more work on it too, yeah.
Correct. So to kind of like bring this out, let's start with insurance. So with insurance in and of itself, there's probably two different categories of it. There's your local insurance restoration roofer, and then there's your storm chasing restoration roofer.
What's the difference?
So the biggest difference between the two, I would say, is one, your local guy is going to stay in his market all the time.
Okay, so someone that's like based in San Antonio, lives in San Antonio, working out of San Antonio.
Correct,
okay.
But only does like insurance specialty claims. They do retail here and there, but they primarily specialize in insurance. That guy is the most susceptible to the woes of the weather, basically.
Okay.
Then you have your storm chaser. Now that model is a little bit better, I think, than the straight local insurance restoration guy. Typically your storm chasers are local insurance restoration guys who also travel. And then inside of storm chasing, there's probably two different categories there. There's the guys that chase and open a location and stay once they've chased a storm so that they can do warranty calls and things like that.
Yeah.
And then there's the other companies that just go and put roofs on, and then they're gonna come back to their home market. I'm not a big advocate of just going and putting roofs on and then coming back to your market, just because personally, put my name and reputation to every person that I sell. I need to be able to sleep at night knowing that we can take care of them if something does happen, especially with these warranties that are going on.
Yeah.
A lot of lifetime warranties, and that's a whole different debacle. But that's pretty much the biggest difference. Is your storm chasers, they're going to travel and chase the storms and chase the work. Your local insurance guys are going to stay here. They're going to be really susceptible to the woes of the weather. And then your retail companies, they may have a slower start to building their company, in my opinion, because you don't get that quick hit of insurance money. But they also have the most control of their profitability. I think they have the best chance at monitoring, like having a good budget and understanding what they can hit on a month-to-month basis. And ultimately, I think if you're going to like sell the company in the future or anything like that, you have to go into the retail model so that you can sell to private equity and show that you can make X amount, God forbid, if there's a storm or not.
Of course. In terms of two things, closing and lead generation, which out of the two would have better success?
I think they both go hand in hand.
Okay.
That being said, you can't close anything unless you have leads, right? So
is it easier? Okay, let me reframe my question. Is it easier to get leads for someone that's a retail roofer or someone that's an insurance roofer?
I think it's a loaded question because it really depends on what's going on in the market at that point in time. It's no different from any other business. Like you have to look at the marketplace, what's going to be there. I would say that when a fresh storm hits, it's way easier for an insurance restoration roofer to go there because their marketing is already targeting that customer. They already have everything geared towards their website on that kind of clientele.
Their clients already have that want.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is just a guess because I can't sit here and act like I know.
No.
But I would figure that owning a retail business is probably more consistent overall with your branding and marketing because you're probably marketing on the inspection. You're probably marketing on, getting an estimate every time. Whereas your roofers are going to talk about getting an inspection to see if you have hail damage. They're going to talk about getting the insurance to pay for it. So there's different types of marketing approaches, I think, there. I think door knocking as like direct marketing with insurance is much easier because it's, the homeowner doesn't necessarily know they have damage, and you're doing a complimentary inspection, you're proving the need for your service, and you're able to kind of convert that to a sale rather quickly. Whereas knocking for a retail roof is like maybe you're talking about maintenance. You might be able to convert quick repairs into revenue.
Yeah.
I think it's harder to sell a roof retail from a door knock lead right off the jump, though.
Right, because it's like kind of going to somebody and saying, hey, you need a new roof. Insurance not going to pay for it. We're here to do the replacement. We're going to charge you whatever we charge you.
Yeah, because if it's $15,000 to do that roof, well, you know, the retail guy is going to charge $15,000, you're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
And if you have insurance assistance, you may pay for $1,000 to $4,000 of it instead of the whole $15,000 because you're just going to pay that deductible portion out of pocket. So it's definitely easier to sell somebody on that than it is to sell the $15,000 right out the door. Now, I do believe that if you're doing retail, you have to talk about financing. Like financing is huge.
Because there's $15,000 that's not being covered by the insurance. Where is that homeowner supposed to come up with that money, right?
Correct. And I believe the easy way to overcome the retail, you know, $15,000 objection is to not sell the total price. You sell the payment. Okay. So it's either, you know, we can get this to $15,000 or a monthly investment of $400. Oh, I can't afford that. Oh, I completely understand. You know, I'm not made of money anymore. But if you can't afford $400 a month, what could you afford? Yeah. You know, something like that to get them focused on payment. That lets them open
up into terms and everything and interest rates, and it just gives you a little bit more of an understanding on what that client is actually needing and what they're wanting. Right?
Yeah, it's a lot easier to sell somebody on paying $300 a month than it is $15,000 one time.
Upfront. Yeah.
So that's a big thing for retail roofers is I believe you have to push your financing. And one caveat I'd have, and this is just from my sales experiences, don't offer financing as a solution to not being able to afford the product. Instead, lead with financing as the option that everybody uses, because this is what happens. You know, if I can't afford something, I'm going to feel bad if you offer me financing. Like, oh, I should be able to afford this. Most people afford it. Now you hit me with financing. It's like, I don't want to finance it. Not everybody finance it. Or you could do the simpler route, in my opinion, which is lead with financing so that right off the gut, if they can't afford the $15,000 roof, they're just looking at the payment. And they don't feel bad because you're offering it as a solution on the back end. And it gets more people receptive to financing that purchase. I mean, we finance everything. You got credit cards, you got financing your cars, it's solar systems, like so much, your house, so many things are financed. It's just a matter of explaining it the right way to the homeowner and the consumer.
And I'm really happy you're touching base on that, because a lot of times, no matter what industry you're in, you're kind of trained like, okay, oh, you can't afford this? Don't worry, I have a solution for you. We'll finance, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the approach that a lot of trainers and managers take when it comes to trying to sell the system. But I think looking a little bit more into human psychology and kind of looking into how clients actually feel, kind of putting yourself in their shoes. Nobody wants that secondary option. Nobody wants kind of that, if I can't, you're only doing this because I couldn't do it the first time type of thing, right?
Bad.
So I think that's a really good thing that you touched on. I think that's something that's really valuable for people to kind of see a different perspective on that same thing that they've been doing for so long.
Yeah, I think, because I've talked to roofers. I've been a sales manager basically for the last 2.5 years. And the biggest thing that I've get hit with is I can't afford it. Well, did you offer financing? Yeah, I offered it. They didn't want to finance anything. Okay, where'd you offer it? I offered it at the end when they told me they couldn't afford it. And it's that's why. Because think about it from your perspective. If you're the homeowner in that situation, no matter who you are, our egos don't want to admit to a stranger that we don't have the money to afford anything. That's embarrassing to us. Whether it's really embarrassing or not doesn't matter. To us in that moment, it feels embarrassing to have that kind of vulnerability, to be like, hey, I just can't afford this kind of thing. So instead of putting somebody in that situation, you lead with it. That way it's an option from the get-go. So it looks like
it's encouraged.
Most people will go that route, which it is encouraged, and most people do finance it. And I advocate that you should finance your roof. And some people will pay cash. There is a benefit to that too. Sometimes it's a little cheaper. You can get a cash discount price. But if you can't afford it, I don't recommend draining your emergency fund to pay for the roof. I would say having another payment is a way better option.
I mean, just look at our family, for example. You know the story about how my dad needed to get a new roof and got solar at the same time. Yeah. Instead of paying that $15,000 or $20,000 for our house roof out of pocket, we're able to put it all into one payment, which that one payment would take over the electric payment and be able to get a roof, zero money out of pocket, right?
Right.
Get as much tax benefits as we can on the roof as well as the solar system.
And the added benefit is in today's economy, inflation's a little crazy. It's me, my fiance, and a dog, right? And I'm spending $200 a month or $200 a week on groceries. So, let's say you have an insurance deal. Well, you can finance the roof and the solar all together, keep the insurance check for a little while to pay for maybe bad credit card debt that's got 20% interest rate.
Exactly.
Or to have a family vacation. It's almost like having a personal loan. You're going to have that note that's going to pay for your roof and your solar, but You might have insurance assistance, and now you have a check that you can kind of put in your emergency fund to save you.
And on a $15,000 roof, that extra $1,000 to $4,000 that's coming out of pocket, that can go a long, long way right now for our clients. So just being able to utilize all the different strategies that are out there, which is something that I'm really happy we partnered up about, just because that's, I think, the direction in which both industries are going is trying to find the way to optimize purchases all at once, right? And make sure that they're able to squeeze out as many benefits as they can. So, yeah, I'm glad you touched on that. One thing I wanted to ask you specifically was, now that you're in 3.5 years in the roofing industry, right? Throughout those 3.5 years, at what point did you feel comfortable, like, okay, number one, I kind of see myself running my own team, running my own business, running my own division, and just having my own business? When did that strike really happen? When did that thought really come into your brain?
So I guess
within the 3.5 years,
I'd have to start by saying, very simply, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
Like, I've always wanted to run my own company. For me personally, it makes sense, tax-wise. It makes sense with the lifestyle that I want to live. It also makes sense just in terms of my interests. Like, it's very hard for me personally to have the same monotony every day. I love chaos. I thrive in the stress. As weird as that might sound, I love it. I love when things are falling apart, because it just means there's tons of problems to solve.
We got work to do.
And I love solving problems. So for me, entrepreneurship has always been something that I've wanted to do. As far as, a roofing company, I'll be honest with you, it was more of a drop of the hat decision, which was...
Was it the first time that...
No, it wouldn't even be that. What it really came down to is I really didn't want to own a roofing company for a very long time, because it has so many moving parts. There's so much liability. There's a lot of overhead. There's these things to consider. So for me, it was daunting to look at that as a business opportunity, because I don't know the ins and outs of every part of the business. I know how to sell really well. That's about the extent of it, right? So I knew that I was going to have to figure out everything. But what it came down to is when I decided that I wasn't a great cultural fit for the last company I worked with, it was to go work for somebody else again, start in a new industry, or start your own company. And
that was kind of what it was at.
Yeah, so I looked at those three options, and I spent a whole day literally contemplating what my next move was going to be. Was I going to go this direction, that direction,
And when is this? What year is this?
This is this year in July. So I'm sitting here looking at these decisions, and I just said, ultimately, if I go into sales, I have to start a brand new pipeline. And if I start my own company, I have to start a brand new pipeline. So I looked at that and I said, well, that's the same thing right there. And I said, what's the biggest difference between working for somebody else? Okay, well, if I work for somebody else, I can sell the job, I can turn it over to a production staff, they're going to build it, I'm probably going to have to collect the check, and then it'll be done. And then I looked at the owner side, and it's like, what's the bigger difference here? Well, obviously I'm going to have to deal with all the admin stuff of building the company in and of itself. But when it came to selling the job, I essentially am just doing one more step. And you make, substantially more as the owner in that context. I mean, when you factor in overhead, it's not really that way, but looking at that, I just went, okay, well, I want to be an entrepreneur. There's never going to be a perfect time, and it's probably can't get better than this opportunity. So I just went ahead and, decided the owner route was going to be the way I wanted to go. And then, it also helped having met you earlier that year, and, you own Trident Solar, and you wanted to add a roofing division. So having a partner to be able to go through this entrepreneurship journey together with was also a big factor in me considering going this direction so soon. Because it'd be a lie for me to say that I understand everything I need to understand about owning a roofing company. I don't. There's lots I'm learning on a daily basis, and that's okay. I think that's where I think more people need to be honest about when they start a business. There's a lot of things that you may know a lot about one thing, and you may know nothing about the rest. Well, if you know enough about this thing, then you don't have to worry about that. Spend your time now learning these other things so that you can contribute to your business, and then eventually you hire people to do the things that you're not great at. And you just have to basically have a baseline knowledge of how to do all the things so that you can keep things moving forward, and then you focus on optimizing it when you find the right person for that seat, in my opinion. And that's why I decided to kind of go with start the roofing company. It just made the most sense. I had a partner. I had the opportunity, the time.
The brand was built.
Yeah, the brand was kind of built there, so it made it easier. I knew that if I started a roofing company, I'd want solar to be a part of it, and I don't know anything about solar. So knowing that those two revenue streams kind of go hand in hand, it just made sense to partner with somebody who understood solar in a way that I never would. Somebody who would make solar their priority, so that side of the business would have somebody that would 100%, like if things got tough, you're going to double down on solar because that's what you know. If things get tough for me, I'm going to double down on roofing because that's what I know. If I'm trying to run roofing and solar and things get tough, the solar is going to fall by the wayside.
Yeah.
So it just made sense that you having that powerful dynamic on solar and a brand kind of built, and then me having the dynamic with roof and helping with the brand building, like it just made sense.
And we haven't even talked about charging whatsoever yet, right? Like that's something that's in the future. But I think one thing that me and Caleb really complement each other on is having big idea versus execution. Big idea versus execution, right? So like in terms of having what is the broad thing that we're tackling and how are the little things that we're going to do to get that thing tackled, right? And I think it's really important for anybody. A lot of people, like for me in the beginning with Trident, I didn't know if I wanted partnerships. I didn't know. And for me, it was never about the company. It was more just about how do I get the right people that I know will complement what I'm not good at to come and join the company, right? And that's what we're doing continuously together now, trying to find those other people to be those complementary parts. So one thing that you mentioned was when you were deciding between going to a new sales company or starting your own company, you said that it was very similar. I want to touch base a little bit on that just because a lot of reps right now might feel like, okay, the sales company that I'm at right now, it might not be the most optimal or the best position for me to thrive in right now. Should I go and start my own company, right? So that's maybe that conversation that they're having with them. What do you think? What would you tell that person that's in that sales position right now, or in that position right now where like, okay, I want to leave my sales company and join either a new company or I want to go and start my own company? Like I'm sure you've had a lot of learning curves and a lot of experiences in between the two. So touch on that a little bit for me.
I love that question. So the first thing I would tell you is like, what do you want? Like that's the first thing I think we all struggle with as people.
Yeah, knowing your why.
It's not even just your why. Like what do you want? What constitutes success to you? What is the life that you want? Is the life you want where you're at home at 5 o'clock to have dinner with your family every night? Is the life you want where you're innovating and you're changing industries? There's a little kid on our door right now. It's pretty funny.
That's okay. You want to come here? Come here. Hello.
Yeah, and then so what do you want? What is the lifestyle you want? You know, do you want the McLaren? Do you want the F-150? Like, what vehicles do you want? What kind of vacation life do you want? What kind of work-life balance do you want? I think it's important that before you make any pivotal career decision, this is why I spent a day, like before I decided to go.
The whole day.
The whole day. Like I spent a whole. I think about my future a lot, so it's not. Some people it's going to take longer than a day, but I literally have my goals posted on my refrigerator, above my door. Like I know where I want to go in life. So I sat there for a day and I just kind of got a little bit more clear on what success looks like for me and what kind of lifestyle I want to have. And like, you know, I don't have kids. I have a loving, supporting fiance. So I have the time to spare right now.
And Mac.
Yeah, and Mac. I love Mac to death. So I have the time right now to invest in building something. You know, maybe one day in the future when work-life balance becomes more important to me, you know, hopefully by then Trident's established enough to where I can step back and make a little bit less money as an owner and pay somebody, you know, good to take over things and just take, you know, an owner draw or something like that from the company. But right now, that's not where I'm at in my life. I'm in a point where I can build. So if you're a sales rep or you're considering going into sales or you're considering making any kind of life change, the one thing I would say before you do anything is to really sit down and think about what you want. Stop thinking about what your parents want. Stop thinking about what friends want. Stop thinking about the social pressures that you have. What constitutes a good life to you? And once you know that, then you can kind of make the decision. Like if you want to make, you know, 150 to 400, $1 million a year, and you want some sort of work-life balance, you know, maybe stay in a sales role. I've seen guys make $500,000 and have some kind of work-life balance. Like it just takes time. You got to build it. You got to put in the work. But the other side of that is if you're comfortable making $150,000 a year and you want to be home and see your kids, just be a salesperson. If you want to live in the stress and build something and you have time and you're not too worried about spending extra time at work and sacrificing Saturdays, Sundays, you know, if you're going to be an owner, you're going to have to work every day that ends with Y. You're going to have to deal with stress constantly. There's a lot of sleepless nights and there's a lot of moving parts. There's always a fire to put out. Just know that there's a lot going into that ownership role and it's going to create a lot of sacrifice for you. And if that's not something that you truly want, then it's not worth it. Stay in the sales role, have a good work-life balance. And there's a lot of sales reps who make a lot more than sales managers. There's a lot of sales reps that make more than owners. It's just a matter of what fits your lifestyle best? What fits your future? What direction are you going in? And that's always adapting and changing. So, maybe this year it doesn't make sense, maybe next year it does. Maybe it'll never make sense. But ultimately, if you're not crystal clear on what you want out of your life, it's hard to make that decision.
I love that. Can you give me 3 things you've learned since starting your entrepreneur journey? It can be anything. It can be as broad as you want, but just any 3 things that you've learned.
I like marketing.
You like marketing?
I love marketing.
Content.
I love sales a lot. I've always loved sales, but I used to dog on marketing because I was a tried and true sales guy. So now that I'm doing a lot of marketing, I found that I really love marketing and the challenge that goes with that. I've learned a lot about insurance. It's been interesting. I learned a lot.
Business and everything.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about business and insurance and
legal.
You
can't leave out legal.
And legal. And then I think the one thing I've definitely learned is it's not really about business. It's more about me. But I learned that in order to be a successful entrepreneur, you really have to have discipline. Like, I learned where there was holes in my discipline. I learned where I would let myself slack off in places I shouldn't. Those
tough conversation to have with yourself.
It really is. And there's certain things that have come around that I have learned my own shortcomings. And that's probably been the most valuable insight since starting Trident is just learning in areas in my own personal character and my own, drive and discipline that I have to work on and improve in order for Trident to be successful.
I love that. Okay, last question I have for you before we sign off. I know everybody wants us to stay for as long as we can, but we got shit to do as owners. But one last question I wanted to ask you is, what specifically made you want to join Trident, number 1? And then what are your visions with the company as well, too? So that's my last question for you.
So, I want to build what specifically enticed me to join Trident was I had a partner to share the entrepreneur journey with, and that partner happened to be in something that I felt was necessary to be in a company I was going to be a part of, and that's solar. I also like the fact that I didn't have to come up with a name, so those kinds of things are nice for me because that's not really my specialty. I'm really good at executing on certain things. I'm not the best maybe in creative and imagining sometimes, so that was really nice. And then I love what the company stood for, which is it's good for our customer, it's good for our employees, and it's good for the community. That's really important to me at being a former sales manager and being a sales rep for other companies is having a place that is
win-win-win.
Yes, good for the employee, I find, is super important because that's the number one reason why people turn over. I think it's super important that you build. My culture doesn't necessarily have to be for everybody, but it's going to be a great culture for the people that it is for. And then, making sure you take care of homeowners. I think that has to be a priority, and I felt like that was important. And then a big part for me is I don't think anybody should want to make a bunch of money to make a bunch of money. I want to make a bunch of money because the only way to institute change in this world is to have money.
A lot of money.
So if I have money, I can make changes in my community. So that's important. So those 3 prongs right there are the main reason why I decided to go into partnering with you with Trident and get this thing started. It really came down to that. And ultimately, I also thought that we would work together well. I liked your vision, your dream for the company. And as far as my personal dreams and vision for the company, I want to be a nationwide company. I want to have multiple offices throughout Texas and the nation. I want to create a great incentive for my general managers and managers, and I want to be able to help people. If Trident is not your forever home, that's okay. Yeah. That's part of it being.
We're
good
not
for
lawsuit leaders.
It's not only that, but I want to teach people how to be successful. If you want to compete with me, go compete with me. Yeah. If you want to, take the skills you're learning in sales and roofing here and transfer it to a different industry, I want to help that happen. I want to give people a way to be successful not only within our company, but outside. And that's going to be the way that I plan to do that is to make training a huge part of our company, like paying mentors and going to conferences as incentives and things like that so people can network and continue to sharpen their skill because it only makes our company better if our guys are the best. And so that's really great. I want to do,
You want to invest in them too.
Collectively, I'd like the solar, roofing, and charging space to do $1 billion in revenue between the 3 different legs we've got here.
Yeah.
So,
and the plans too. The way that we have it structured and everything, the way that I've kind of built it out and everything. it's going to take time, and it all starts here in San Antonio, little old San Antonio, Texas, right? But the goals of being nationwide, the goals of hitting those revenue marks, the goals of having those teams and being able to impact those families, whether they're homeowners, community people, or people on our team. I think that's something that we shared a lot, and I think that was a big reason why this worked out and this why we're doing all this right now, right?
Yeah,
So,
no, I 100% agree. I think ultimately it's just like we share a vision and what we'd like the company to be overall.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of steps between now and then. But
that's easy. That's the easy part.
But it's just a matter of like showing up every day and doing the work, man.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited. That's ultimately where I'm at.
My man. I am just gonna. I don't know if we're gonna cut this out or not, but I am genuinely so happy that we're able to come together and not only just get our visions aligned, but also to be on the same page about a lot of things, to be able to bounce a lot of things off each other. Like, I'll give a quick example. On Friday, cease and desist thing, right? Things like that are gonna come all the time, whether on my plate, on your plate, but one of us has to have that different perspective. One of us has to have kind of like a different idea or angle on the specific problem or whatever the thing that we're talking about, right? So genuinely, what I was getting at is I'm just really happy that we're able to come together. I think everything happens for a reason. I think the universe kind of made this happen to where it happened. I think timing-wise for both Trident, how it started and everything going, plus with your experiences in roofing, I think all of that happened for a reason. So I'm a big believer in the universe. I'm really happy. I think I manifested this. Like, I'm very, very happy that like we're doing this now and that we're continuing to grow. And I think we have very different personalities as well too that like tie
Definitely.
in. I mean, you can just, I mean, that one's an obvious one, but yeah, I'm really excited to go this thing out with you, man. And I'm really happy that you're on board. So
Yeah, me too,
welcome
man.
to Trident, brother.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate you. This was episode 2 for Trident Talk, and we went above the roofline. Next week, we'll be checking out some more stuff in detail. And if you liked everything that you saw, please give us a like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.